Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 10th of March, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have with me in the studio Mike Robinson. And we're also delighted to have Ben Rubin joining us from Studio 2 by live link.
Well, yesterday was the so-called day of reflection about the so-called coronavirus pandemic. The British regime, of course, wanted to reinforce the idea that there were mass deaths as a result of SARS-CoV-2, which there weren't. The deaths were mainly the result of the response to SARS-CoV-2. But if we just put that back on screen for a second, we can see there it's an opportunity to come together to remember those who lost their lives since the pandemic began and to honour the tireless work and acts of kindness shown during this unprecedented time. So, we might consider what acts of kindness came from the British government, at least over that time. But there were demonstrations taking place in London yesterday, and the vaccine injured were represented there, which is important since they are barely acknowledged by any government since the jab rollout began. But looking back at the 9th of March 2020, this was the opening graphic on the UK Column News that day, with the outrageous suggestion that Russia was to blame for sowing panic over the developing so-called pandemic, when in fact it was the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Express who were pushing that narrative as hard as they possibly could. The so-called broadsheets had not yet jumped on the bandwagon, but of course we subsequently found out that the reason that the tabloids at least were pushing this as hard as they were was because of the Spy B insistence that personal jeopardy was not high enough yet. So the possibility, though, of emergency legislation was already being discussed, and that eventually came as the Coronavirus Act 2020. Health Secretary at the time, Matt Hancock, outlined how volunteers who already play a central role in helping the health and social care system function, he said, would be given additional employment safeguards so that they could leave their main jobs and temporarily volunteer in the event of a widespread pandemic. That was what he was saying at the time. Now, Hancock was clearly acting perhaps as a Russian agent there, I don't know. But anyway, he also discussed the possibility of allowing certain civil proceedings in the magistrates' courts to be conducted via telephone or video, as well as the expansion of audio and video live links for criminal proceedings. And he also talked about that emergency bill as having strong safeguards, including sunsetting after 2 years. And the government at the time made it clear that it was only proposed, that these were only proposed measures if needed, based on clinical and scientific advice. And of course, not very long after this, we got the emergency legislation, we got the lockdowns, and we got the rest. Now, within a couple of days of that 9th of March UK Column News, Italy was in lockdown. Troops were on the streets in Italy. Austria, Slovenia, Poland and the Czech Republic had closed their borders. In Poland, the church was encouraging people to gather and pray, and the Polish government was telling them to stop and stop being so silly straight away. France was considering closing their borders. Ireland had closed schools and banned gatherings of more than 500 people. Donald Trump had grounded all flights between the United States and mainland Europe. And across the EU, schools, shops, offices, factories and restaurants had closed. And here in the UK, the Premier League and the English Football League were suspended until the 3rd of April 2020 at the earliest. And what about Boris? Well, Boris was being attacked from all sides for not doing enough. He hadn't fallen under the weight of the Daily Mail hysteria quite by then, although it didn't take him long. As we just mentioned, Matt Hancock, though, was continuing to make preparations. Now, he had announced that all government departments had started to engage with industry leads in their respective areas, as government with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport were due to host a meeting with sporting bodies the following day, and DEFRA was expected to have more meetings with supermarkets. And, well, why were they meeting with supermarkets? Well, of course, the reason they needed to meet with supermarkets was that the fear porn was having an effect and people were panic buying toilet rolls. So let's just have a look at a short excerpt from that report from the 9th of March 2020. what's going to happen about this, because coronavirus stockpiling, according to the Mirror, what each UK supermarket is rationing as panic buying continues. And the image on there is a customer notice. We're saying that due to higher than normal demand, we've been experiencing some product shortages. In order to support as many customers as possible, they're therefore putting limits on the number of toilet rolls that you can buy to 4 packets in one effort. That's all you're able to get. But we don't need to worry, because the Guardian here is saying 9 reasons to be reassured. And they're saying really that the hype over this, the hysteria, is coming from social media. No criticism in this Guardian article for the Daily Mail or the Daily Express or any of the other mainstream newspapers that are pushing this in a really insane direction. But this Guardian article here, which is headlined "Coronavirus, 9 Reasons to be Reassured," gets even better, because at the end, they say this article was amended on 7th of March 2020. An earlier version wrongly stated that, quote, "a solution of ethanol, hydrogen peroxide and bleach will disinfect surfaces. It is dangerous to combine such substances." It now states correctly that a solution of ethanol, a solution of hydrogen peroxide, or a solution of bleach will disinfect surfaces. David, you seem to be losing it there, and I can quite understand why.
Oh, it's just so funny. Can you explain to me, why does coronavirus mean that everyone buys toilet paper, but the beast from the east means that everyone buys bread?
I mean, we were clearly having fun with that at the time, and the fun didn't disappear. But we still need to remember, I think, that in the following months and the years, as they went past it, the situation became somewhat darker as lockdowns and vaccine mandates were brought in. So I just want to end this by showing a minute or two of the video put out by Oracle Films yesterday. Let's just watch this.
March the 9th, 2025. A day of reflection, set aside to remember the friends and loved ones lost to COVID and the sacrifices that we all made. Remember? Of course we do. But do not betray those who every day bear the consequences of a flawed vaccine rollout. The vaccine injured have been marginalized, even scorned by the medical profession, the media, politicians, the very people who persuaded them to take the jabs in the first place. They hoped that the COVID inquiry will provide answers, some truth on which to build. Instead, they met a familiar brick wall.
What we cannot do is make precise determinations in relation to whether a specific vaccine is safe, or determining matters of causation where death or injury has resulted from specific vaccines. Safety is a relative concept, and any determination, if it could be made, would serve no sensible purpose.
It's outrageous what's happened with the UK COVID inquiry. It's turning into a whitewash and a complete waste of public money.
Many issues could and should have been addressed. Not least, were the public deceived over millions of AstraZeneca jabs which were actually a relabeled Indian-made brand, Covishield, close to the expiry date? We'll investigate that shortly.
Now, that's just a couple of minutes from about 18 minutes of release from Oracle Films. If you haven't seen it, go and watch the full thing. It is fantastic, and Oracle does deserve your support. So if you can, help them out as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, terrible times, Mike, and I just want to remind the audience that while the government in its platitudes in 2025 is talking about the kindness, the same government system, both Tories and Labour, were using applied behavioural psychology to ramp up fear, to make people so fearful, more fearful, that they would adhere both to the lockdown practices and, of course, accept vaccinations. So at the end of the day, who is the danger in my book? It's our own government. We need to start questioning. But tragic events, and good to see so many people out on the streets. Well, let's move on to something else that seems to be taking place in order to capture the whole of society in UK, and that is the 100-year partnership with Ukraine. Now, I've got some interesting headlines here. You might not actually recognise these two newspapers, and I'll give the answer for you because both these newspapers, The Week Junior and First News, are newspapers specifically put out to target children. And if we look at the front page, this is clearly, in my opinion at least, a brainwashing exercise to get young children with no ability to understand the geopolitical events taking place and the brutality of the war to drill into their heads that Ukraine and Zelensky means peace, prosperity and a future for UK. But a few days ago, we were reminding the audience that there was a call for evidence over the Ukraine 100-year partnership agreement. This is part of the document on screen, but the deadline is actually today. Now, I want to say that we put out we alerted people to what was happening. In just a moment, I'm going to be talking about one of the UK column audience who decided to take action. But if we just have a little look at the inquiry itself, it says it's looking at evidence on questions including what will materially change as a result of the treaty, what is the retrospective role of the treaty and the political declaration within the partnership, how the maritime partnership contained in the agreement is expected to operate in practice, and how likely Ukraine's NATO membership aspirations are in the current climate, and what more the government could do to ensure this outcome. And of course, bringing Ukraine into NATO, Mike, as I'm sure you'll agree, is a red flag to Russia at the moment. So this is all designed to keep the angst and the conflict going. And lastly, it says, how does this agreement relate to the wider issues of security guarantees for Ukraine? If we go back to the original document published on the 17th of January, this is just the opening section on defence. We can't go into all of the small text, but let's just focus in on the start of it because it's talking about establishing stronger and closer defence cooperation, industrial bases, cooperating in the exchange of practical experience, equipment, munitions, training and development, and in particular the joint production and development and joint production of advanced weapons and ammunition manufacturing capabilities. Now, remember this because we're going to be talking about something in just a minute where this phrase, I think, is extremely pertinent. But here's the really excellent thing that one of our viewers reacted to this and they actually submitted their own response. I'm just going to bring up a couple of the little paragraphs, but it says that this is my own account. That's the viewer. And in answer to the specific questions, and the first one, how does this agreement contribute to the UK's national interest? Are there any risks to the UK? Our viewer says it does not contribute in any way to the UK's national interest and instead creates risks by consolidating the belligerent position taken by the current and previous governments, which deliberately rules out finding peaceful solutions to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And this individual then went on. This was another section. What will materially change as a result of the treaty? Under Article 1 of the treaty and Pillar 0.1 of the declaration, what will materially change is a further enmeshing of the UK into the Ukraine-Russia conflict, underwritten by military assistance of no less than $3 billion a year until 2030-31. No money for the public, but $3 billion a year for Ukraine, and for as long as needed. For Ukraine's current regime, this brings further hardware and technical assistance for their conflict. For the UK, only a further strain on already imploding public finances and the appalling prospect of conscripting young British men and women as peacekeepers. I wonder what the effect would be if we had 1 million people putting this type of response in. But let's just do the last bit here. Are there other aspects of this treaty or political declaration that you consider notable or could have significant policy implications? It is notable only for its arrogance, hubris, and ultimate irrelevance and should be scrapped. Declarations such as Article 4 claiming the parties will strengthen economic inclusivity, supporting efforts to reduce inequality, tackle poverty, and leave no one behind, ring particularly hollow at a time when ordinary citizens in both countries are struggling with the consequences of government decisions that do anything but address these issues. So I've got to say, Mike, I think this individual was absolutely spot on. There's more really good comment, but this particular person stepped up and made the response, which is the reason that we alerted people that today was the deadline. So this is very encouraging to see. But in general, we don't need 1 or 2 or 10. We need thousands of people to be challenging in this way, because it does produce immense pressure on the government. Now, we'd also like to thank another UK column viewer for a tip-off in relation to this particular defence manufacturer, MBDA. This is just part of their website, very glossy. Excellence at your side. And I was fascinated to have a person whisper in my ear that there were some very interesting things going on around this particular organisation. Now, just to give you a bit of background, this is what they have to say about themselves on their website, that they're a European, that's a very interesting expression, a European leader in the missile industry. About us, number 1, it's a unique multinational European group, a world leader in the field of complex weapons systems. And MBDA and its 18,000 employees work together to support, now listen to this phrase, the national sovereignty of our home nations and their allies. Mike, I'll ask you here, a bit of a low ball, but what's your opinion of what our home nation means?
I don't know what they mean by it, but our home nations is European. I mean, we're talking European Defence Union here.
Well, of course, you got it in one, but of course, many people would believe that our home nations might be talking about England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. You've hit the nail on the head, because this is not talking about UK. This is talking about Europe. They go on to talk about visions and strategies. It says it's a European group capable of designing and manufacturing complex weapons to meet the full range of current and future operational requirements of the 3 armed forces. And here, thanks to our 50 years of expertise and our recognised technical mastery in designing missiles and missile systems, we develop and deliver increasingly advanced defence systems to meet all types of threats. Now, the tip-off was very interesting. We could call it an allegation at this stage, but I'm sure more will come to light, because I was pointed at the sites of this company. So this is their map. They're in Bristol, they're in Stevenage, close to London, but this is the site of interest, Bolton, opened in 2017. And let's put a bit of comment in this now, because we've been informed that 191 million has been allocated for a new missile production facility at MBDA Bolton. And if we add a bit more to that, we understand that the deal was signed before the Labour government took office. And when complete, the new unit that this money is going to facilitate will make it a major weapons manufacturing facility in the UK. Now, interestingly, the tip-off included some questions about what the potential implications of this were. And I'm going to bring these up on screen. People may have their own views. But the first point was, because of the stage at which this was signed off, that the inference was that the defence budget increases have been in the pipeline for a long time. Also, that the defence strategy is non-party political, so it doesn't really matter if there's an elections and the parties change. The defence strategy is going to continue, particularly the strategy against Russia. And number 3 here, the war conflict or threat of conflict is clearly for an extended period of time. We can see this by the amount of money being put into this facility. Number 4, and this I found particularly interesting, as with the COVID decision-making, the government it's asked as a question, is the government with its politicians as facilitators, is there something above the government which is putting this policy in place? It's certainly not the politicians bringing this forward. And the last one is that the EU Defence Union was always the end goal and has never been off the table despite political claims to the contrary. So I think some pretty astute comments there. And I just thought I'd bring this up on screen. This is Dominic Cummins, who's been posting on X or tweeting. Good to see number 10 copying vote leave on 2 baby steps, whacking the corrupt aid budget, and extending the review across all security, including agencies and single intelligence accounts. The mod doesn't have the answers on espionage, cyber, but if number 10 really wants to make huge progress, there's an easy way. This is what caught my attention. Get 5 to 10 of those who participated in the highly secret part of the 2020 review, from which Wallace, that's Ben Wallace, was totally excluded because he's such a security risk, to go through all the programs the mod and forces admitted were screwed and should be closed. After we left, these documents were shredded, and Trolley Wally stole the money for the future to keep ploughing in all the disasters like Ajax and Watchkeeper. So the mod get even more awful for 3 years. And this particular communication ends by, if a SPAD wants to do this properly, get in touch and I'll give you the names of key officials who can dish you all the mod's highly classified dirt. So there's a lot of rumour, there's a tip-off, there's allegations, Mike, but clearly we're seeing that there's a beast in the military-industrial complex, which is clearly ramping up, not defence of the nation, but an offensive capability which appears aimed at the Russians, in my opinion.
The assessment of Ben Wallace is completely accurate, however. So, but Ben, let's welcome you to the programme and let's talk some carnage.
Carnage, indeed. Carnage and drama from across the Atlantic as the red side of the Uniparty selected an obscenely rich capitalist oligarch to run the country. But don't worry, it's not Trump in America. It's Carney in Canada. And Mark Carney, the former central banker, is going to be only the second prime minister in Canadian history without a seat in Parliament. He's been installed. Let's see the election results coming in Ottawa last night.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, with 131,674 votes, resulting in 29,457 allocated points, representing 85.9% of the vote.
Prime Minister, I think it's clear we should just skip a generation.
So Trudeau's out, thankfully, but Carney's in, out of the frying pan and into the fire, as they say. He won a landslide, a Liberal landslide. He's been voted for by the party. He won 85% of the vote. But who is he? So he's been presented as an outsider, certainly a political outsider. But he couldn't be more establishment if he tried, actually. Let's have a little look at his background here. So comes from a political family. His father, Bob Carney, ran as a Liberal candidate, but lost to the Progressive Conservatives, whatever that means. He went to Harvard and studied economics, then got a PhD from Oxford, played a lot of hockey, talks about that all the time. He then spent 13 years at Goldman Sachs, and then went into a series of positions in the Bank of Canada and the finance department of the Canadian government, and then was actually tapped to run the Bank of Canada in 2008, immediately before the financial crisis. And then his stellar handling of the economy through the financial crisis gave him a platform to step up and start talking about global governance and the transformation of the global financial system at places like the World Economic Forum, where he was on the board for about 15 years, actually. He's a big-time WEF guy. And that's been his life for the past sort of 15 or 20 years. In particular, he was voted a Time most influential person in the world in 2010, alongside Lady Gaga and Bill Clinton, various other people like that. So you kind of get a sense of the individual. And he's not just a central banker, right? Importantly, I mean, that would be a significant development for the new leadership of a country, for someone to be a central banker. But until yesterday, he was the president of the Group of 30, right? So this is the oversight board for the global financial system. They basically provide governance to the Bank of International Settlements. You can see him in the front row of this image here. They've actually already taken him off the members page of their website, interestingly. It's probably a good idea. He's still highly influential across the private sector as well. So he's an independent director at Stripe. Stripe's become basically the de facto global payment platform. It runs digital payments across the whole of the internet. I believe UK Column use it, Substack use it. It's used absolutely everywhere. And that gives him a huge amount of visibility over trade flows online, right? I mean, this guy's really ensconced in the top levels of the banking system. He's a Bilderberger. He's actually listed still as a former member on the Bilderberg website. He's a close friend and confidant of Linda Rothschild. We can see him squiring her around the Vatican here when they went to meet the Pope a couple of years ago. And he's extremely opinionated on issues like net zero. We will not get to net zero in a niche. It requires a whole economy transition, right? So this is the big global economic transition that we talk about a lot. He's absolutely front and center in this. And he's absolutely adamant that companies that don't adapt, including companies in the financial system, will go bankrupt without question if they don't adhere to net zero policies. So this is an astonishing guy to be put into a leadership position of a country like Canada. And I would just say that they're just really not hiding it anymore.
Indeed, they're not.
I was lost for words as you were going through that, Ben, and just thinking incredible that we've now got the full power of the banks absolutely controlling anything, everything, and anything in one particular country. How could they have done it in Canada? I don't know. Let's move on. A big thank you to everybody supporting UK Column. And if you like what we're doing, then please support us. There are a number of ways of doing it. You can make a donation. You can take out a monthly membership or an annual, or you can take out a lifetime membership. And thank you very much to the people who've had the confidence to do that. We certainly appreciate it. If you haven't been there or haven't been there for a while, have a look at the UK Column shop, because a purchase also helps what we do. And as we like to point out, we do stock health products from Clive de Carle, and we make a small percentage on that. But the key thing to remember is what we're putting out in the news is there freely available for people to share. And it is clear that despite censorship via YouTube and Facebook, our information is being widely shared. And a huge thank you to people who are watching us from overseas and sharing our material. Now, I'd also like to say that UK Column on location in Cheltenham is shaping up very nicely. We've talked about the speakers, of course, over the last few weeks: Catherine Gunn, Alex Thompson, Patrick Henningsen, Raja Mir. And I'm delighted to be joining that lineup myself. I think it's going to be a fantastic day. And the important thing is we're aiming to make this relaxed. There is time between the speakers. We've got some really interesting socializing, which will be happening during the day. And we have taken note that people say, can we at least speak to you after the event? So there's going to be opportunity in a bar area after the main day for us to relax, talk to each other. And of course, we have said if you've got an instrument and you like to bring it along, a musical instrument, please do. But it's going to be a great day. And if you haven't bought a ticket, then you need to do so because tickets are going very quickly. Now, I'd just like to say that a reminder, really, that I've had a series of interviews with mothers who've had their children snatched by the UK state. I know this is a very difficult subject for a lot of people, but it needs to be talked about. And I'd just like to say that a few days ago, I was able to interview Leah Summers, who's a lady who's worked alongside Gloucester Social Services. She is now a whistleblower. She's lost her job. But in her comments and conversations with me, this is something that absolutely stuck in my mind. She described the activities of the social services in the Gloucester area, at least, as being, quote, brutal. And this is really the nub of it. We need to get the top off before the government takes more children unlawfully. And if you think you're safe because of your income or your professional position, then you need to think again.
Okay,
Mike.
let's move on. You'll be absolutely delighted to know that the former government minister, Lord Willits, has been appointed as the first chair of the new Regulatory Innovation Office. That sounds good, doesn't it? And this is going to lead a team focused on bringing emerging technologies like drones delivering medicines or AI training software for surgeons to market quickly and safely to improve lives, just to quote them for a second. Now, the example that the British government gives to launch this is new drones, but drones mixed with healthcare, of course, because drones, they say, are already cutting blood delivery times from 30 minutes to just 2 minutes, speeding up testing turnaround times to improve NHS productivity. I mean, it couldn't get any better. So the focus on this is a company, an organization called Appian. This is founded by NHS doctors. They work with global drone company Wing to fly blood samples from Guy's Hospital to Synovus Lab in St Thomas Hospital for urgent testing. And this rapid turnaround, they say, this service supports some of their most vulnerable patients, ensuring they have the best possible care. But it's not drones in the NHS that I want to focus on here, because in parallel with the Willits appointment is the announcement that the Food Standards Agency has launched a pioneering regulatory program for cell-cultivated products, and it's going to be led by, well, he's one of the people leading it is Patrick Vallance of COVID fame. So what are we talking about here? Well, they're calling it food, which is not a word that I would apply to it, but nonetheless, as you can see on screen here at the moment, they're saying this is a new sandbox program funded by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology's Engineering Biology Sandbox Fund, which will make sure cell-cultivated products are safe for consumers before they're sold, while supporting innovation in the sector. So this is very much the MHRA model, convincing us all that it's safe to eat lab-grown meat and other lab-grown materials, while at the same time making sure that they reinforce the industry as it develops. It's not going to be a regulator, in other words. So this is going to be a 2-year development program. And so that's how long you've got if you're going to campaign on the issue. It's going to be in collaboration with various academic bodies, the cell cultivated products industry and trade organizations. And their aim is to gather rigorous scientific evidence, where have we heard this before, about cell cultivated products and how they're made, and to inform how the Food Standards Agency and the Food Standards Scotland regulate these products. Now, today, the Food Standards Agency has announced that 8 of these companies have been selected to participate in the program. But don't worry, the participants were selected through a rigorous selection process and represent the diverse international range of technologies, processes and ingredients used in CCP products. It couldn't get better. Now, the businesses participating in this are Hoxton Farms UK, Blue Nalu, which is from the United States, Mosa Meat from the Netherlands, Gourmet from France, Rosalind Technologies, also from the UK, Uncommon Bio from the UK, Vital Meat from France, and Vow from Australia. And as well as also, they're also working with, as well as working with the industry, they're also going to be working with academic partners, including the Cellular Agriculture Manufacturing Hub, led by the University of Bath, the National Alternative Protein Innovation Centre, and the Bezos Centre for Sustainable Protein. The trade bodies who are going to be represented are the Good Food Institute Europe and the Alternative Proteins Association. So, Ben, I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I can't imagine where it could possibly go wrong.
Absolutely nothing good can come from a program such as what you just described. The sandbox bit, that's terrifying, right? So the sandbox is basically, it's literally like a children's sandbox, so they can get in and they can play and they can make shapes and do, have a bit of a mess around with. So that's literally what they mean, and it'll be a regulatory and a technology sandbox in order to help them think through all the potential blockers to actually making it happen. They'll just push them all out of the way and then they'll roll that thing out into society. What an absolute nightmare. Anyway, what was going on last week? It was all the Zelensky, Trump in the Oval Office for about 10 days, wasn't it? And Russian spies on the cover of newspapers over the weekend. But that's not actually what was going on last week at all. This was going on last week, amongst other things, the inaugural UK-Ireland summit. This is a really big and important meeting to talk about security and growth at the centre of this special relationship that is being established between the UK and Ireland. It sits right at the heart of the public-private model, which is fascist. We use this quote all the time. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it is a merger of state and corporate power. And the grand convening of state and corporate power took place last week at the EY office up in Liverpool. EY is a strategic partner of the World Economic Forum. And this gentleman, Rohan Malik, who's very close to Starmer and Rachel Reeves, he's the EY EMEA and UK&I managing partner for government and public sector, which means that he leads the public-private partnership bit across the whole of Europe, Middle East, India and Africa, and especially here in the UK and Ireland. And he loves going in and out of number 10. And he was there to greet the Prime Minister at the government summit. Why are they holding a government summit? Does the UK government not have any buildings in Liverpool? We've got no offices up there. We've got to do it in the EY office. I mean, what's all that about? Right, and Malik's there. He's saying how fantastic it is to greet the Prime Minister. He's talking about how proud he is of the role of our organisation as a convener of leading voices across the public and private sector for discussions on how to tackle the most pressing challenges facing society today, with a particular focus on infrastructure, energy, and net zero. There was lots of glad handing, lots of photo opportunities, lots of important people being very important out in the lobby before they got to the business end of things in the EY boardroom. Here we can see Keir Starmer in the foreground with his wings spread wide, feasting on the rotting carcass of British society. Oh no, sorry, that's not that. That's some vultures around the carcass of a zebra. This is the boardroom. Here it is. And we can see Starmer and Malik fixing his cufflinks and a whole bunch of business people, including, actually, this isn't a business person. This is public and private together. So we've got Steve Rotherham across the table there. It's amazing what you can glean just from looking at these photos and the names and everything that pops up. So this is the new Metro Mayor for the Liverpool City region, right? So he's one of the key figures leading the devolution process in the Northwest. And then sitting immediately next to him at this very important meeting, we had this fella, Jerome Frost, who's the chair of Arup. Right? We talk about Arup quite a bit. They are an extremely interesting British company, structural engineers. They basically make the dreams that architects sell reality. And they've built a huge number of really iconic international buildings, the Sydney Opera House, Coventry Cathedral, the King's Cross redevelopment. They're big on the Crossrail initiative, and they've gone all in on sustainability and net zero. And Arup sit absolutely at the heart of the complete physical and technological transformation of, importantly, our cities, right? Because really this is about the implementation of the 15-minute city, connected city agenda, which is a World Economic Forum agenda, and Arup are a partner of the World Economic Forum, just like EY are, right? These convenings, these meetings is how World Economic Forum policy is implemented into the country. This is how it happens. And these people sit absolutely at the heart of it. This is the global fascist system. And it's not just the WEF, it's C40, importantly. So Arab actually signed the COP agreement, the original Paris Climate Agreement at COP21 back in 2015. Arab were co-signatories of that. And at the same time, they established a formal partnership with C40 cities, which is the Global Confederation of Mayors, which is currently co-chaired by Sadiq Khan, that Steve Rotherham from Liverpool will be very closely linked into. And that was ostensibly, C40 ostensibly set up to solve the supposed climate crisis. And Arab and C40 have been issuing various reports. We spoke about this last year. So this is the future of urban consumption in a 1.5 degrees C world. And they talk about the huge risks apparently faced by humanity between now and 2050 if we don't pay loads of money to Arab and their mates about things like sea levels rising and food insecurity, interestingly. So the stuff that Mike just spoke about will absolutely be part of this agenda. Issues like extreme heat, that kind of thing, right? And importantly, really importantly, for regular viewers in particular, Arab and EY are both very, very, very closely linked to Common Purpose. I've spoken about this extensively with Brian, and obviously Brian and Mike have both spoken a lot about Common Purpose over the years, and they are in the background, but I believe absolutely central to what's happening, and we're going to be talking more about them over the coming weeks to bring them back into frame. And what I'm also particularly interested in, and I think this needs much closer examination, is this Irish relationship, right? So actually, if we look at the statement that Jerome Frost from Arab put out, we can see at the bottom here, excuse me, I've jumped ahead. We can see it's great to see the UK and Ireland partnerships being forged for the future. And Ireland, as people will be well aware, is going into absolute meltdown at the moment. I would say that it is far in advance of where they probably want to get the UK to be. And there's some, we're entering extremely dangerous territory in Ireland and also in this country based on the direction of travel that these people have been taking us down. And Starmer in particular has got an extremely close relationship with Ireland. He's very interested in it. He spends a lot of time there. He has a real cultural affinity for it. And apparently he's the most Irish Englishman here, according to an Irish newspaper. And both he and Sue Gray and Morgan McSweeney and Matt Doyle and many other people in the current administration have got links into Ireland. I think it's important for us to look at that and understand what the implications are for the rest of the UK.
Ben, thank you very much for that. Well, perhaps Ireland should be grateful they haven't been locked into a 100-year partnership with Keir Starmer and his mates, but maybe that's for another discussion. But while all this goes on, what about King Charles? Because, of course, he's fully in bed with everything from the World Economic Forum to these huge global corporations that are the builders, the enablers of the World Economic Forum policy. What has he been up to? Well, let's have a look at the important things he'd like to communicate to the ordinary people, the little people. So here's BBC. The King reveals his playlist from Marley to Kylie. This is the important headline that you should remember, and he's there at his desk with an on-air sign. If we just bring the subtitle on, the King is putting out a Commonwealth playlist from reggae to disco. So if you're an ordinary person in UK, don't worry that the country's absolutely being destroyed around you to head to Build Back Better, because the King is going to keep you occupied with a little bit of music. Let's hear the words from him, from the man himself.
Throughout my life, music has meant a great deal to me. It has that remarkable ability to bring happy memories, comfort us in times of sadness, and to take us to distant places. But perhaps, above all, it can lift our spirits to such a degree, and all the more so when it brings us together in celebration. In other words, it brings us joy. So this is what I particularly wanted to share with you. songs which have brought me joy. This seemed such an interesting and innovative way to celebrate this year's Commonwealth Day. Thank you for listening. I wish you all every possible blessing.
So apologies for that. I know you were struggling there, Mike, as that played out. I do find that really was an absolutely obscene clip from the King. I mean, at the end of the day, what is this man talking about as he sits there surrounded by his enormous wealth? Music brings him joy, well, maybe, but what about the suffering of the people, not only in the United Kingdom, but worldwide, that he could do something about if he were not spending all of his time on building a new world with the World Economic Forum and those global corporations. But let's focus on something that directly concerns the King. And we'll bring on screen here, if we can pop this on, the series that I've been doing about the children being stolen by the UK state. And I've done 3 interviews with this young lady, Sam Nass. And essentially, Sam trafficked into this country in horrible, horrible circumstances. And then when she's given safety and asylum in UK, what happens is that same state turns around and steals her children. And of course, the interviews we've been talking about, the disgusting things that the UK child stealing system has been doing. But what happens when a young lady like Sam actually writes to King Charles for help? Well, we're going to give you an exclusive on this, because we can tell you that she did actually get a reply from Buckingham Palace from the King, but obviously through his head of royal correspondence. And the letter's actually up on screen. But the first thing we'd like to tell you is that when a reply was sent back to Sam, it was posted with a second-class stamp. And from the video that you've just watched, you will have seen that King Charles barely has 2 pennies to rub together. He can manage a little bit of music, presumably second-hand records, to go with his second-hand stamp and second-hand advice. And if you're not sure what a second-hand stamp looks like, second-class stamp, this is where we go to Royal Mail, and we're looking at something like this. So pretty appropriate. But if we get into the meat of what the King had to say, it is truly appalling. Dear Salma, I'm writing to acknowledge receipt of your letter, which you sent to His Majesty the King. Your reasons for sharing your personal story are very much appreciated. I must inform you that as constitutional sovereign, His Majesty is not able to become in ongoing legal cases. While the King is unable to become personally involved, I've been asked to pass on the contact information for the following services that may be able to help in your case. If you've not done so already, there are a number of support services in London that are available to you. You may wish to reach out directly to the services the Metropolitan Police provide on their website, and there's a web address. His Majesty would like me to thank you once again for taking the time to write and share your experiences with him. It shows immense strength and courage to reach out and ask for assistance. The King would have me send you his warmest wishes. So I was utterly stunned when I was given this letter. And of course, Sam herself, disgusted that the King should fob her off more or less with a pat on the head, a second-class stamp, tell her to speak to the very authorities, including the police that have failed her, and then whilst he can get on a world stage to engage with the World Economic Forum or President Zelensky, or travel to America to try and influence President Trump, the King can play his music, but he can't actually engage to help somebody that's been through the trafficking system and had her children stolen. So if we can pop that back on screen, I just want to emphasize this, just utterly vile that what he actually does is pats her on the head, tells her that she's a brave little girl, and then recommends she speaks to all the people who failed her to date. And that second-class stamp was the final insult for Sam. So I'll leave the public to reflect on the quality of the king that's in our post at the moment. But meanwhile, he's been pushing out his Commonwealth message in these uncertain times where it's all too easy to believe that our differences are problems instead of a source of strength and an opportunity for learning. The Commonwealth's remarkable collection of nations and peoples come together in the spirit of support and, crucially, friendship. Now, remember that King Charles is using the Commonwealth and its billions of people within the Commonwealth as a power base to help push through his political agenda in line with the World Economic Forum. And in our Green Kings series, you're going to learn more about this. He also added that the Commonwealth's ability to bring together people from all over the world has stood the test of time and remains as ever important today. And of course, we know he means this because we've seen all the documentation to do with use of the Commonwealth in order to help lever in this rules-based international order. So any compassion from the king? I don't think so. Any concern for child abuse survivors? I don't think so either. And if the king's not going to give them any help or assistance, Mike, should we be looking to the government for assistance on the issue of child abuse?
Probably not, because the Foreign Secretary has appointed Harriet Harman as Special Envoy for Women and Girls to champion gender equality worldwide and help deliver economic growth, is what they said in this tweet here. My question is whether or not this is even nearly appropriate and what message it sends. Because as the UK column reported back in 2011, Harriet Harman in her younger years was actively campaigning for the legalization of paedophilia, apparently because Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt held respectively the posts of legal officer and general secretary to the National Council for Civil Liberties. It's known better these days as Liberty. And as we say in this article, in an NCCL response to the government plan to reform sex laws, which were dubbed a Lolita's Charter at the time, NCCL suggested reducing the age of consent and argued that childhood, this is a quote, childhood sexual experiences willingly engaged in with an adult result in no identifiable damage. NCCL claimed that children suffer more from having to retell their experiences in court or to the press. And they went on to claim that the new law, which was being proposed at the time, could lead to, quote, damaging and absurd prosecutions and increase censorship. And they went on to say that a pornographic photo or film of a child should not be considered indecent unless it could be shown that the child had suffered, and that prosecutors would have to prove harm rather than defendants having to justify themselves. Now, NCCL response was signed by Harriet Harman. So I leave it up to the audience to decide if she should be in this new role, despite any expressions of regret she may have made about this in more recent years.
It's disgusting stuff, Mike, and I think the pattern is very clear. I'll just end this segment. It's a slightly different subject, but if our children are not safe, if our children are being stolen from us, our livelihoods, wealth in the family is being hoovered out by successive governments and now Keir Starmer, I just wanted to bring people's attention to this, and that is essentially over a quite a long period, the UK column has been alerted to crimes within the legal system which are going unchecked by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And much of this is to do with the theft of property from vulnerable old people in care facilities, residential homes and nursing homes. And an individual who's done a huge amount of work having a look at what's actually going on has pointed out to me that if we go back to the Legal Profession Act of 1974, this act regulated the admission of foreign lawyers into the UK legal profession. By this time, Commonwealth lawyers, including those from India and Pakistan, could qualify as solicitors or barristers in England and Wales. And he's also pointed out the deregulation of probate services, 1980. Over time, probate work, which involves managing the estates of deceased individuals, became a lucrative sector. Historically, probate has been controlled by solicitors and specific legal professionals. But reforms in the 1980s 1980s and the 1990s opened the field further. Now, what this individual is warning about, and the individual has done huge research in amongst these organisations himself, is that foreign lawyers or people who claim they're legally trained are coming into UK. They are being given bona fide positions within legal organisations. They're undertaking criminal activities. And then if the heat gets too much, they leave the country, thereby escaping prosecution. And the individual says the key point is that the Solicitors Regulation Authority absolutely aware of what's going on, but the scale of it is so massive that they claim they haven't got the resources to deal with it. So we're not pointing a finger particularly at those who've come in from India or Pakistan. What we are saying is that it is clear that people are coming in from a number of countries with questionable legal qualifications, and where criminal activity is taking place, the Solicitors Regulation Authority and indeed the police are simply not investigating. Children not safe, property not safe, old people not safe.
Indeed. Now, Ben, let's move on to hubris.
Not just hubris, Mike, although hubris will figure front and centre. Hubris meaning overbearing pride or presumption or arrogance, accompanied by misandry, which is hatred of men. And we're going to have a little bit of, dare I describe it as fun in this last segment? Maybe, we'll find out. And we're going to centre it on this image to start with, which is the School of Athens by Raphael. It's been described as his masterpiece and the perfect embodiment of the classical spirit of the Renaissance. It brings together some of the greatest thinkers of antiquity in one image, but there's a problem. There's not enough women in it. So one brave group of ladies decided to do something about it. Let's find out.
We almost couldn't get anything that was more the pinnacle of the canon of art history than this. The original painting is set in classical ancient Greece with 50 men in it, including Plato and Aristotle and, Pythagoras and people like that. And we just thought, the thing that's incredibly missing from this image is women.
We are in the museum building at Trinity, and we are here to try and recreate Raphael's School of Athens fresco image. So I think it's going to be fun getting everyone up in togas, and they're going to recreate it here.
Let's put the focus on women, let's celebrate women, let's have women supporting women, and move out of the way, guys.
So Trinity College is like the classical embodiment of academia in Ireland. And so we want to, if you like, storm the pinnacle by bringing all of these women in here, posing them in costumes and poses roughly reminiscent of the original Raphael painting.
It's almost exactly 120 years since the first female undergraduates were permitted to cross the threshold of Trinity College. And look where we are now. So this is really a celebration of women in the academy and the extraordinary research and reach, I suppose, that women in Irish society now have across all disciplines.
If we look around these hallowed halls today, what's amazing to see is a whole different population and cohort of people. Yes, women, but also thinking about women from other backgrounds and communities, whether that is disabled women, whether that's queer women, whether that's trans women, whether that's women of colour and of different religious backgrounds. And I think it's both an acknowledgement of the changing in society, the changing in education, but fundamentally the changing of Ireland.
Okay, so it's difficult to know where to start with that, to be honest with you. Like, let's go back to the original image, yeah, importantly. So this is the School of Athens. This is the picture that we've just seen recreated. And in this image, we have Ptolemy, Socrates, Pythagoras, Archimedes, Diogenes, Plato, and Aristotle, and others. So these are men that have influenced everything that we have right? The whole of Western civilization. They laid the intellectual, philosophical, mathematical groundwork for science, for the arts, everything that has gone on to become Western civilization over a period of more than 2,000 years, right? And actually, it was about 2,000 years after the birth of Plato that Raphael painted this piece. He painted it between 1509 and 1511. And this was to honor these men, these great thinkers that he placed into the painting. They didn't place themselves into that painting. They were put into it by Raphael, and they were put into it by history, by posterity, right? And importantly, we have Plato and Aristotle at the absolute center of it. Plato on the left in the red robe, Aristotle on the right in the blue robe. And you've decided to replace them with yourselves, right? So this is Mary Robinson on the left, and I've spoken about her a lot over the past few weeks. So she's running the Dandelions. She's part of this Connected Women Leaders program, and she's decided to participate in this and to place herself in the position of Aristotle, and then in the position of Plato on the right-hand side, we've got a lady called Linda Doyle, who's in the video there, who's the first female provost of Trinity College in Dublin, and the building that they're in is the museum building at Trinity College. Right? There's something about this which is just really difficult to understand, like quite why you would put yourself into these positions. Right? Who's behind it? So if we get the image back up on screen, the ladies to the back right of the image, there's 7 ladies there. That's Nekalia, and that is an art group. Nekalia, I've definitely said that wrong. I had some coaching from Alex Thompson on how to say it, and I think I've completely messed it up. So I'm sorry, Alex. But that basically means the witches. Right? So we've got an art group called the Witches who've decided to construct this thing, and they've replaced all of these great thinkers of antiquity with a bunch of their mates, basically. Right? So if you look in this picture, and we'll put a link to the website, so you go and have a look at it. There's a key which shows that it's a lot of social activists, postmodern professors, local government officials, people affiliated with the UN. And I think this is just a great insight into what is driving a lot of this, the female agenda, to be honest with you, not by all women, but by some women. And it's the kind of women who would put themselves in an image like this and replace Plato and Aristotle with someone like Mary Robinson, for example, Anyway, enough on that for now.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in extra, I've no doubt. But Ben, I noticed the only thing I have to do to join the club is to say that I'm a woman.
Oh, indeed.
Okay,
well, what is a woman, Mike?
We're going to... Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's fine.
I was just saying, I think we'll end the UK column news there. For me, it's tragic that we have women being pulled into this sort of activity, and yet they cannot defend their own children in the UK, at least. But more on that in extra. Huge thank you to our audience today, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Spread the word, spread our information. That's why we do what we do. And Mike and Ben, thank you for joining me in the studio. We will be back for UK Column Extra in a few minutes. So if you're a member of UK Column, stay posted, and we'll be back on shortly. Otherwise, look out for the interview going out tomorrow, that very brave lady at 1:00. Thanks very much. We'll be back for the news at the same time on Wednesday. Bye-bye.